Hello, American Prestige viewers, fans, listeners / viewers,
Loved ones.
loved ones, people who have never seen this show before and are just stumbling on this thanks to the YouTube algorithm, whatever your reason for being here. It's Derek. I am joined, as always, by my friend and comrade, Danny Bessner, and we're here for another one of our weekly award-eligible Q&A sessions. Feel free to nominate us for whatever, if there's any awards that go out for people to do things like this. But here's how it works. To recap, we do this every week, but if you guys are not subscribed to American Prestige, step one is to subscribe to American Prestige, become a paid subscriber, as you all should be doing. Once you've done that, you can join our Discord. And once you're in the Discord, you can ask us questions. We pick one question every week to answer here on video exclusively so that you can see our faces for some reason. That seems to appeal to people. And so that's how it works. And I guess I'll just get right into this week's question. Danny, this is addressed to you. It's from Tim. Danny often frames the future of leftist organizing as bleak as workplaces become harder and harder to organize for a whole host of reasons. I recently listened to an interview on The Dig with a tenant organizer, and the prospect of tenants' unions seems fairly optimistic. Where labor organizing efforts can easily be run roughshod over by businesses, tenants are harder to beat when they're working together. It's easier to fire / replace workers than evict a tenant. You can't offshore housing, etc. So my question is, with housing costs and homelessness growing in importance every day, is this a potentially fruitful ground for confronting capitalism? How do you see tenant organizing fitting in with the broader struggles of the left in the years to come? Could tenants' unions replace labor unions as crucial political blocs for organizing the working class?
I think it's a really important question. And the first thing I would say is that I think tenants' unions are important. I know people who have been doing organizing in them, and I think they're a really crucial way to bring renters, which I would imagine at this point, or if not now, soon, most Americans will be. However, I do think it's important to understand the difference between tenants' unions and the industrial unions of the past. The industrial unions that in very particular historical contexts gave and not gave, but earned and won really significant protections for workers and helped workers for a time participate in the fruits generated by capitalism. I think those unions were steeped in a very clear identity, a working identity, the identity of literally being a worker and a type of sociality of going to work every day, interacting with people in a particular place, developing relationships over days, weeks, months, and years that really encouraged the sociality that over time through organization allowed people to put themselves on the line for their fellow workers. And I think that is a fundamentally different experience than being a renter, than paying your landlord once or twice or however many times a month that you do in a way similar to your fellow tenants in a building, or if you're renting a house or something along those lines. So while I do think tenants unions are important and they could help people win particular gains at their site of housing, I don't think that they're going to be the type of replacement for industrial unionization that would allow ordinary people to actually get a particular piece of the capitalist pie, a larger piece of the capitalist pie. I would put tenants unions somewhere in a category similar to co-ops, which is that they're good and that they're useful, but they're not really ways to challenge capitalism at the structural level. If they were, I think you'd have to develop over time the identity of being a renter, which I think the sociality of that is just very different from being an industrial worker. It is not equivalent in the same way. So again, useful, but I don't think are really going to be able to confront capitalism. Though I think any left-wing project, given where we are in actual history, will definitely make space and encourage tenants unions in that they are important, though in a very particular way.
Yeah, I mean, I would have the same basically comment. Like, this isn't an area that I'm hugely familiar with, but I have a hard time imagining how you could build a tenants union to rival the AFL-CIO or the Teamsters or these national trade union, labor union organizations that were really ubiquitous and politically powerful in the middle of the 20th century that have are not as politically powerful now. But it's just hard to imagine organizing people across the country. I mean, across a city, even into a single tenants union, let alone across the country. We've just never, aside from the logistical challenges of something like that, and the fact that you've got, a lot of people that you're basically distilling down to a commonality of like, I pay rent every month. Everybody's got different landlords, everybody's got different property managers, like everybody's got a different experience with their rental situation in ways that I don't think you could say the same thing about, factory workers. There's a lot more commonality, it seems like, there. But we've just never done identity in this country based on anything that happens around the home. It's always, what do you do? What's your work? What's your job? That's where we find identity and meaning, or we're told to find identity and meaning. And so if you're going to join up, express solidarity or experience solidarity with somebody, it's more likely to be in the workplace, or maybe through something like, we don't really do these anymore either, but like, the old kind of ethnic societies, like an Italian American League or an Irish American League in a city, something like that. But past that, I don't, I don't see a lot of domestic opportunities for replacing labor unions. Now, where I would say, to build on another part of your comment, Danny, where I would say the tenants unions could be important is in the apocalyptic future that we often hint at on this show, when things like mutual aid societies are not just going to be about surviving the capitalist system. They're going to be about surviving the breakdown of that system in the midst of climate change, in the midst of mass migration, in the midst of real chaos. That seems like a very realistic, increasingly realistic outcome here as the system gets more dysfunctional and we approach some of these
don't do anything to
scenarios.
stop anything.
Right, exactly. That's where a tenants union could become the basis. Not necessarily like your argument with your landlord isn't going to be that big a deal, but it could become the basis for some real kind of collectivized ways to survive that world, but not on a large scale. I mean, these would be in particular buildings or particular neighborhoods, and I think we're going to be at that level of granularity in terms of like, how do you if things get really bad, you're going to be at that level of granularity in terms of how do we survive this. So I think there's a place for them, and could be a very important place for them, if the future is as bleak as we often hint at on this show. But yeah, I just don't see it as a viable replacement for labor unions. I'm not sure if there is a viable replacement.
That's the problem, right? Like this is the joke that Matt Christman and I used to make, or that we lost in 1914. That as I've made a million times on this show, because I don't think there is an obvious large scale organization that is able to challenge capitalism in a meaningful way any longer. And that as Tim, not the person, so much more than a person to me, Derek. Tim is one of my closest friends. But as Tim suggested, that there's so many difficulties in organizing people today, from offshoring to gigification to people not working at one place for many years, because organization is so based on sociality that without that sociality, it's difficult to imagine anything arising in its place. I guess the good news, quote unquote, the good news is that the right wing doesn't appear capable of addressing these problems whatsoever. I was just thinking about Trump's recent tariffs, and he has tariffs on goods, and my understanding is some services, but he doesn't address like financial flows whatsoever. He doesn't address monopolization whatsoever. He doesn't address the deregulation of business that allowed and the deregulation of finance concomitantly that allowed private equity to take off, or hedge funds to take off and do things like allow for gigantic mergers that limited American power and the power of ordinary Americans in a variety of industries. So I guess the good news is that I don't think the right is going to develop any useful answers to this problem either. So this is where we are, where that there's no obvious strategic path forward. Again, as I said, I think before in the show, is that we're in the moment of just kind of diagnosing what's going wrong. And as I'm sure many people listening to know, I think we're not even at the stage of correct diagnosis. We're still using analogies, not only the fascism
We're
analogy.
not at the stage where people want to hear the diagnosis yet.
Right.
Like, so yeah,
So,
it's
so it's a
still
big
casting
problem.
around.
Like we're reaching back to Reconstruction or the
Right.
70s or interwar Europe, and there are these all of these analogies, which in some way can illuminate certain things, but I don't think get to the heart of the matter. So I was thinking about this the other day as I was walking, like how much more fun and interesting it would be to be a writer or a thinker in a moment where there's like it's not just decay and dissolution, a moment where you feel like you're building something. But I feel like this is really a moment of decay and dissolution, and it's just a series of rearguard actions, of which tenants unions is one. Right, even in a capitalist society with a strong industrial labor union base, you wouldn't need tenants unions necessarily. But the fact that all paths for possible change seems so foreclosed, both in terms of domestic policy and I would say in our realm of foreign policy. This is my whole imperialist realism concept, that book forthcoming soon. It just feels impossible to really change anything, and it sucks. And I guess the best we could hope for right now is correct diagnosis, eventually allowing for the thinking through of new strategic options, which again doesn't seem like really people seem to want to wallow in the certainties of the past and this type of certainties of analogy that I don't think really address themselves to today. So it is a bleak moment. It's a moment of dissolution, and I think that this question reflects that to some degree.
I'm even struggling to sort of figure out what the corresponding, like how you would correspond to a labor strike in a tenants union. I guess a rent strike is the
Mhm.
obvious example, but it just doesn't have the same, like it doesn't have the same power to me. Like there's no reason that a landlord, a property owner, couldn't just evict everybody at that point. If you're not going to pay the rent, then go, and you've broken the rent strike then, because you've got people who will want to move in. I guess if the abundance people get their way and we start building a bunch of new housing, like maybe the conditions would be stronger for tenants if there was an abundance. But I don't, that's not really what they want. That's not really what the abundance people are after. They're really about, kind of cutting red tape for developers
Well, you
who
can't
will
have
certainly
deregulation.
make. Yeah,
Yeah, just
go
very
ahead.
quickly, deregulating red tape without regulating other things doesn't matter, right?
Right.
It's like the same
Right.
exact problem with the tariffs. You would have to like make the type of large real estate purchasing consortiums illegal, or limit the number of properties one is able to hold. So it's like cutting of the
You would
red
have to
tape
have
might,
protections. I mean, you would have to have
yeah,
legal protections for tenants unions to take action against their landlords without reprisal, without the kind of reprisals like,
right. Is the
that
Supreme Court
you
going to
could
do
see,
that?
they can't, they're not going to send the Pinkertons in to, like, break down your door and rifle through your jewelry drawer to take whatever they need for the rent. Like it would just be a whole host of legal things that would have to happen that are not going to happen. I mean,
Right.
under present conditions.
Right, which is again sort of going back to the era of dissolution and decay. And I really wish we weren't in that. Again, it would be more fun. It would, to some degree, be more interesting. But now we're having knockdown, drag out fights over diagnosis, and
Right.
so it's just like I have very, I'm skeptical, unfortunately, of the future being any brighter, and it just seems like we're going to descend into a world where everyone's just trying to get their own because they can't even imagine social solidarity, not through any fault of their own, but through the actual structure in which they live.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it feels like every one of these Q&As has been somebody being like, "Well, couldn't we try this?" And you and I like bat it down in this very
No,
depressing
it's
way.
important
But
to
this is the time that we're living in.
yeah, and it's important to ask those questions because, like, at first of all, we might be wrong. Maybe the revolution will be built on the backs of tenant unions. You never know. Truly, I'm not being facetious. You never know. But I mean, talking through these issues will eventually lead to the correct diagnosis. Which I'm currently at the place where I just think this is what's happening right now. It's just emergent from many coherent trends in American history, and so going from there and trying to understand what's happening is, I think, the only path forward right now.
So keep the questions coming. I
Keep
guess
them
is
coming,
what
everyone.
Danny's saying.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to solve the problem. Is you're going to subscribe to American Prestige and ask us questions, and eventually a solution will emerge from one of these videos. So, Danny, thank you
through the dialogue.
Thanks everybody
exchange.
for watching and for listening to the show and supporting the show. And tell your friends, spread the word, share these videos, and share the podcast. Like and subscribe,
and we
as
love
they
you
say.
all.
I don't even know what that means, but subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think that helps us too. I don't know what else to say. Leave reviews, maybe. I don't know. I don't know
people
how
don't
any
leave
of this
enough reviews. Give us 5 stars.
Yeah, actually,
that actually helps.
If you're gonna give us 5 stars, leave a review. If
yeah,
you're
otherwise
not,
don't
keep it
leave
to
a
yourself.
review.
Yeah.
All right, bye
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
We love you.
Bye.